We are doing a webinar today on suicide safety planning. I'm so excited that you're all here with us today. Thank you. I am a licensed independent social worker. I've worked in suicide prevention and post-prevention for many years now with a variety of communities, especially diverse communities, Native American, Black, Latinx, homeless youth, and LGBTQ populations. Most recently, I spent 14 years in the Veterans Affairs working with LGBTQ veterans and veterans with complex medically undiagnosed challenges. What we're going to do today is talk about evidence-based suicide prevention. So after getting to know each other a little bit with some polls that I hope to hear your thoughts through, we're also going to then get into these evidence-based suicide prevention items: telehealth suicide prevention, risk assessment, safety plans, the dive reflex, and means restriction. And we will end with a discussion about culturally responsive to community-defined and socially distanced suicide prevention. You should have received, hopefully, a reminder email about today's session. In that email, there were the slides, as well as a resource guide that I've compiled for you, a variety of suicide prevention resources that are available in our current COVID-19 socially distanced reality. What I've done in the next couple of slides is giving you some high-level takeaways from these reports. If you find that something here catches your ear, catches your eye, this might be another place to dig a little bit deeper by going into the report. But essentially, Zero Suicide provides evidence-based toolkit that really focuses on services, crisis intervention services, and culture change. And what it's talking about is how we know that when we adjust the culture of an agency to think about suicide risk assessment being done consistently in regular time periods, when we think about making sure that every staff person is receiving training in suicide prevention, when we think about having our leaders driving a systems and culture change throughout the agency vis-a-vis suicide prevention, it can really make a difference. When we take a systemic view, when we think about automating our systems, when we think about making sure that there's coordinated care between, let's say, outpatient to inpatient to residential programs, that people have warm handoffs, that we know where there is bed space available should somebody need bed space following a suicide experience of a suicidal crisis, then we have the best outcomes. And that we have collaborative safety planning, reducing access to lethal means, and incorporating suicide loss and suicide attempt survivors' feedback in the systems that we develop are absolutely essential. So again, I'm going to be a broken record, shout out and thank you to our peer specialists who are here. The work that you do in talking about your lived experience, we know makes a major difference in the development of systems and services that are most effective. And we want to have training, as I mentioned, for everyone, and standardized practices and automated charting. This is another part of that automated system. So that includes screening, assessment, planning, and systemic escalation processes. That means as the risk goes higher with our clients or consumers, that our system is responding in kind with escalated support systems. So the crisis continuum, a systemic view, essentially what we're talking about here is that we know when somebody is having a mental health crisis like suicide, like a suicidal crisis in the community, they are most likely to down-regulate, to become calm, to have the ability to think of alternatives, ways to deal with stress, to feel safe if they are not in an emergency room, a hospital, or a jail. If you think about last time you're in an emergency room, what's happening there? People are racing all over the place. You're hearing bells and people speaking loudly about triage and people, you can see people who are in incredible distress physiologically. That is not an environment where people tend to kind of calm down a little bit and down-regulate their central nervous system. Obviously, the same is true for jails and prisons. We know that when we can provide support for people experiencing suicidal crisis in the community, they're most likely to recover. So it's most effective treatment, but it's also the most cost effective. And so when we don't use our police force as mobile crisis units, when we don't use our police force as emergency mental health providers, that leaves the police force available to do the law and order things that they are set up and frankly trained to do. So we think about de-escalating a situation, maximizing the process and flow between systems, and we think about interconnected systems as the real kind of central point of a crisis continuum of care for suicide prevention that is the most effective. So I want to invite people to look at this slide and see if you see your county represented here. This slide, the data is from the Mental Health Services Office of Accountability Transparency Suite. This is 2018 to 2019 data. These are non-exhaustive examples. I just threw several of them onto the slide because it might be that your county has crisis continuum resources that you're not aware of. Do you see your county listed having a crisis prevention hotline or crisis services, crisis stabilization, mobile crisis teams, or suicide prevention programs? And again, these are just a few of the resources that are available across counties in California. I really recommend, if you haven't ever done so already, to go to this link of the Transparency Suite at some point and check out what is available in your county. More importantly, check out what is available in the counties of the people that you work with, because they may or may not be in your county. So we're going to go on to postvention. So postvention is about how we support people after there has been a suicidal crisis, especially behavior that has been engaged in an attempt to end one's life. It's important for us to think about any unmet needs. Are there safety needs? What kinds of coping skills can we help the person develop? How can we help them to gain connection to other people, develop a sense of hope, not feel like they're a burden? And what kinds of systemic improvements can we make? Can we make sure that there's a warm handoff? So let's say somebody was in a brief psychiatric stabilization unit, they become stabilized, they're about ready to go home. Is there a follow-up appointment with a mental health provider? Are they connected to a peer specialist? How do we ensure that as they go from one location in this crisis continuum of care system to the next, that they're not having to retell their stories over and over again, which can be re-traumatizing? How can we identify the least restrictive interventions where they have the most autonomy to make decisions for themselves? How can we ensure that they're receiving safe and dignified treatment and that it's trauma informed? So I think that one of the most challenging things for myself as a clinician has always been working with clients who experience such significant distress that they have repeated suicidal crises. I don't know if that's something that any of you, I'm seeing a couple of heads nod. Yep, that's something that many of us have experienced. And so I wanted just to share a video with you for a second. What I'm going to share with you now is a very short video. This video kind of describes a little bit about the stress model. This is Linehan's theory of biopsychosocial theory of emotion dysregulation. And this can help us to understand, especially for people who have repeated suicidal crises.
If you're a person who has suicidal thoughts, one thing that might help make sense of it is the stress model, or Linehan's stress model, or the biosocial theory.
Some of us have a baseline, a biology, a history that just makes us more prone to stress. And so our stress level in comparison to like the average person's stress level is just higher. And what happens if you walk through the world with a higher level of stress is that when something stressful happens, whatever that might be, our emotions tend to respond more quickly. They stay there for longer, and they take longer to come down than, say, the average person.
what it does is it explains why somebody would want to escape. Because what it shows is that some people have more intense emotions, more painful emotions, and that anybody who's having really strong and painful feelings often wants to escape those, wants to get away in any way that they can. And our brains learn all sorts of ways to get out. Those can be things like drinking, using drugs. Sometimes it's eating. Sometimes it's, distracting yourself with running or exercising, other types of exercise. But sometimes it's suicidal thoughts. There's some research that shows that having a suicidal thought can actually make you feel less bad. That is to say that if you're somebody who tends to have strong emotions and those emotions really wash over your whole body and are really intense, if that's you, then your suicidal thoughts make sense because it's your brain's way of trying to get an escape from feeling so bad. And the good news is that when we think about it that way, we can start to find other ways to manage those intense experiences, to both prevent them, to manage when things are getting more and more intense, then to manage the hottest place, and then to manage afterwards. The DBT skills help with each different phase of that. And over time, they also help with the intensity so that you get to choose how you react in situations so that you can, if you want to feel that way all the way, you can go for it. If you choose not to, you can not go for it. You can do something else. That's the biosocial theory. And it helps explain why people do the things that they do and why they have suicidal thoughts sometimes.
Okay, so, I want to share that that's just one theory behind suicidality, but it is a theory that I have found many clients to really resonate with because it takes away this idea of blame and it understands more in terms of the idea that people are in pain and feeling overwhelmed. And that importantly, there are things people can do when they're in that place to help themselves get through it. So we're going to go now, switch gears a little bit to thinking about suicide prevention over telehealth. Okay, so very briefly, I want to now go to, let's see here if I can keep moving on, suicidal crisis bird's eye view. So suicidal crises are often time limited. It's a period of time when someone feels that they cannot cope with the extreme feelings that they're having, whether they're grief, sadness, loss of hope, rage, or shame. If we can help people to not act on the suicidal thought, at some point that feeling will dissipate. It's not that life will be roses and smiley faces and heart emojis after that, but rather that they will have an increased sense that they can get through it. It's really important to notice that from a culturally responsive perspective, the feelings and the events that can lead somebody to a suicidal crisis are somewhat different based on culture. We've seen in some research with certain Asian ancestry populations, for example, that for people who have experienced a suicidal crisis, when we ask them what feeling did they have right before that suicidal crisis, the feeling is not depression. That's what many of us might assume the feeling might be. The feeling instead is shame. So I point this out just to say that it's really important when we're working cross-culturally that we're checking in with our clients, especially if they are from cultures, racial, ethnic, religion, spiritual communities that are different from ourselves, to understand what the feelings are that precipitate a suicidal crisis. As Ursula mentioned, Dr. Whiteside mentioned in that previous clip that you just saw, a person's problem-solving, decision-making has been interrupted when they get to a point of suicidal crisis. They feel overwhelmed. The things that they've been trying to do to be okay have not worked. And so what's really important and helpful for us to do is to create activities, and this is where we're getting to the safety plan now, identify activities that can interrupt an escalating experience of stress. So when our body experiences really high levels of stress, we release stress hormones, we release cortisol, right? We release hormones that create a domino effect, because when the hormones like cortisol, a stress hormone, is released into the body, what does it do? It speeds up the heart rate. It narrows the vision. When the polyvagal nerve that runs through the body is activated, the heart rate goes up. People breathe faster. Literally our inner ear changes, so we hear things differently. Why is all this happening? Because way back in time, when we were cave people and we were having to run from a saber-toothed tiger, when there was imminent risk to our lives and safety, very quickly our bodies needed to change so that we could get the heck out of Dodge and survive an attack from that saber-toothed tiger. Well, we're not being chased by saber-toothed tigers. Now we're sitting in traffic. Now we have deadlines at work. Now we have the risk of being evicted because of the recession. Now we have any number of other high stressors. But the thing is, our body continues to react the way that it did when we were back as cave people. Because when you were a cave person, if that saber-toothed tiger caught up to you and cut your arm or your leg, in order for the body to not bleed out, to increase the chances that you would be able to get away from that saber-toothed tiger, the blood is drained to some extent from the limbs into the core of the body so that the person doesn't bleed out. That experience of sudden shift in blood, or how we breathe faster, our heart beats faster so that we can move oxygen through the body faster so that we can get away, all of those things can create a sense of feeling a little bit woozy. And the experience that things look differently, that we can have a tunnel vision, or we hear sounds differently. All of these things are because the autonomic system is being disrupted by stress. When someone's in suicidal crisis, if we can help to slow down that whole system, we can really make a difference in their ability to manage whatever those extremely distressing feelings might be. So a couple of telehealth suicide prevention tips, and I'm aware of our time here. So I want to point out to you that at the bottom of this slide, I've got two resources. One is a telehealth clinical and technical considerations guide for mental health providers that I've written with some colleagues. If you are engaging in telehealth practices, there's an entire section there on suicide prevention. I have heard from many people that it's been helpful. Additionally, I have recorded another training that specifically goes into detail about suicide prevention during COVID-19. And actually the webinar that you're seeing here is by another provider. I have done another recording that I can share with you later. But essentially the big things that are important to know is that when you're doing telehealth, suicide prevention over telehealth, it's always important to start off knowing where the person is located. At the beginning of every call or every Zoom video or whatever platform you're using, ask them, where are you right now? In case we are disconnected, we need to know what those local crisis numbers are. It's a good idea to have those numbers listed on a piece of paper in case you lose internet access or in case something else happens, you've got it outside of the computer. It's important to explain that if we lose connection, I'm going to try and call you back. If you don't answer, I have no choice but to assume the worst, that I need to get someone to help you. So I'm going to have to call a crisis line. It's important always, I think in the beginning of our sessions that we're working with someone to do a suicide risk assessment, to understand if they are currently at risk of suicide and to understand if they have a history of suicide. And that we do collaborative creation and updating of the safety plan on a regular basis. The safety plan that I did with clients 2 years ago, so many of them have things like, if I feel overwhelmed and to the point where I don't think that I can go on living, before doing anything, I'm going to go to a Starbucks. I'm going to hang out and play some chess. Well, these days, many Starbucks are closed or people are not hanging out the way they did. So this is one of those reasons why it's important to update safety plans regularly, but especially when there are major shifts happening like shelter in place orders or a recent suicidal crisis. We always want to go back to that safety plan and update it. If they have identified a support person in the safety plan, it's important that you have a signed release of information form so that you can contact them. And always, 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 we want to make sure that we're documenting this assessment and safety plan. This is important always, and especially in telehealth contexts. So if they have identified a support person, here are some great things that you can share with that support person once you have approval to do so. Once you have a signed release of information from the client, you can also ask the client to share this information with the safety person. It is really important always that they have a copy of the safety plan, that they're aware of any means restriction. That means if the person, for example, has firearms in the house, are the firearms being kept in a safe? Are the bullets being kept in a separate place than the guns are being kept? What kinds of self-regulation strategies, things that the person finds helpful to calm down, to regulate that central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system that I was talking about before? Psychological emotional first aid, there's an app that's later on in the slides. This is a great thing to share with safety people. Safety people do not have to be licensed clinicians or trained peer specialists in order to use psychological emotional first aid. And there are a couple of websites here that I think are really great to share with support people. So while this particular webinar is not specifically focused on assessing suicide risk, I do want to point out that there are a couple of really great tools that I highly recommend if you are working at an agency that does not have a suicide protocol in place, suicide prevention protocol. The first is the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. This is a very simple, I think, elegant tool. Only maximum 6 questions. If you ask the first 2 questions and the person answers yes to question number 2, then you go on to ask questions 3, 4, 5, and 6. If, however, the person answers no to question number 2, you go directly to question number 6. Literally, this takes just a matter of minutes. I also like this tool because it has directions down here. If the person answers yes, that someone should seek a behavioral health referral, however, if the answers to 4, 5, or 6 is yes, seek immediate help. It tells you exactly what to do. There are free trainings online to learn how to use the CSSRS. And there are specific tools for triaging this tool for schools. And you can watch even demonstration videos of people using the CSSRS with clients. If you work with youth and young adults, the ASQ suicide screening questions are also a really great option. These are a series of questions that were developed for use specifically with youth from the ages of 10 to 24-year-olds. It can also be used by adults or with adults. The National Institute of Mental Health in 2008 led a multi-site study to develop and validate the suicide risk screening tool for youth in medical settings. And it consists of 4 yes or no questions, and it only takes, are you ready for this, 20 seconds to administer. I also really like this tool because there are links here about COVID-19 and using the Ask screen with youth and adults right now during the pandemic. Suicide contracts do not work. Safety plans are brief evidence-based interventions that do work. The reason why suicide contracts don't work is multifaceted. The first thing is that for many clients, be they youth, young adults, or adults, when we say, promise me that you won't hurt yourself, oftentimes they will feel like we have not understood that they are in such extreme pain, distress, sadness, rage, shame, whatever that feeling might be, that's way more powerful than the motivator of not wanting to disappoint or anger our social worker, psychologist, peer specialist, or whomever. Secondly, they don't work because it sends an inadvertent message that I, as a clinician or peer specialist, am more concerned about my liability than I am about your experience as a client or consumer. Safety plans are found to work because they actually provide options for people to use to manage the overwhelming feelings that they have. The most effective safety plans are collaborative, culturally responsive, strengths-based, they reduce stigma, and they maximize social support and connection. There are lots of safety plans out there. I've provided you several examples that you can click on later. I'm going to share 2 of them with you here today. It's really, really important that when a safety plan is being conducted, that people, they should be written in the first person language. So the safety plan should be written as I will da 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 da, not Susie Q will da 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 da. So what this means is that it's really important for the client or the consumer to have the safety plan. It's a good idea for us as clinicians and peer specialists to document it, certainly in our clinical notes. But the most important thing is not for us to have it. It's really for the client or consumer to have it themselves. So the first safety plan that I'm going to share with you, this is the safety plan that has the most research. This was written by Stanley and colleagues in 2008, again, recently published in 2018. This is what I'm going to use with you today. Whoever is a brave soul who would like to volunteer to do a role play with me. But as I said before, it's not the only option. This is another example. This is from the Now Matters Now website. This is the video that I shared with you before, Dr. Ursula Whiteside. This is her organization, Now Matters Now, and this is a safety plan that's been developed by people like Ursula who have lived experience with suicidality. And I think that it looks a little complex, but I think it's actually a really good model for some people, because what it does is it talks about our emotions in terms of fire prevention when we're in a fire and when we're on fire. And that can be very helpful language, especially for young people or for older adults as well. And they give actual examples of things that you can do if you're in a fire prevention mode. So this is how to help ourselves to not get to a full-blown crisis in a fire, things that I can do to deal with once those thoughts, suicidal thoughts and urges come up, how I can actually manage those things. And then if I am on fire, direct advice for things that I can do when the feelings become overwhelming. So as I shared before, the idea of the autonomic nervous system and how our heart, our lungs, our stomach even, our digestive tract, our brains, all inner ear, all of these things are connected. And once we get into a fight or flight mode or freeze, that's another thing that we understand now is that it's not just that we fight or flight, sometimes we freeze. That is the reptilian part of our brain that becomes frozen. And this is why it's so important to let people know who've experienced trauma, be it sexual trauma or any other kind of trauma, if they recall themselves freezing and not defending themselves, that is actually a very normal response. It does not mean they deserved the abuse or that they were in any way responsible for the abuse. It's actually part of the autonomic nervous system shutting down. When somebody becomes overwhelmed with emotions, so if they are at that on fire yellow, if they are in a fire at yellow, or if they are on fire at red, it's really helpful to do things to slow down the autonomic nervous system, to reverse the release of the cortisol stress hormones. Remember I said before that it's a chain of events, right? Okay, very stressful thing happens. Maybe I receive, I've just lost my housing. My brain says, emergency, emergency, and starts releasing cortisol hormones. Then what happens is my heart rate starts going. I start breathing fast. I start feeling clammy. Maybe I'm a little dizzy. I'm getting tunnel vision. Cortisol has a reflexive thing where the cortisol causes those autonomic nervous system things to happen. And guess what? Then my brain says, oh my gosh, I'm really in danger. I feel like I'm about to pass out. What is that? Then what happens? I release more cortisol hormone. The really good news is that cortisol hormone in the body is absorbed within 2 to 4 minutes. So if we can create a buffer for about 2 to 4 minutes, oftentimes we can interrupt that process from happening. This dive reflex cold water therapy is a great example of one thing that we know is evidence-based to help us do that. So I'm going to share this with you right now. As I pull it up, I just want to say 2 things to you. Over the summer, I have a 7-year-old and I have a 9-month-old baby. Over the summer, when there was so much stress and everything going on, I drew a lot of bubble baths for my little boy, because just like we'll see here, it's a wonderful way to help a young person and adult to kind of calm down and to regulate. So what I'm about to share with you is just 2 minutes of this video. This is again, Dr. Ursula Whiteside, who's showing us how to use the dive reflex.
Too much caffeine today and then an upsetting email, and my heart rate is at 101. So I'm running a bath, a cold bath, and I'm gonna slip myself into it and see whether that works or not. Right now, my hands are shaking, and it's hard to think clearly. I'm working on doing paced breathing, but it's so hard to do paced breathing when your anxiety is this high. It's such a cruel thing. I'm walking in right now, my heart rate's 111. Sitting down, oh God. I just turned the water to as cold as it would go. I'm up to my waist. My heart rate is at 102. Now I'm up to my chest bone. I'm up to my armpits and my neck, and up to my wrist. So everything is submerged except for my wrists. My heart rate now is 98. I'm going to do some paced breathing. 96, 95, 94, 93, 92, 89, 88, 87, 86, 85, 84, 83, 82, oops, so 84, stuck there, 84, all right, great. So I've been in here 83, 82, a couple minutes now. Now it's a little bit easier to do some paced breathing. 76. No longer feels really cold for the most part. 74. Sorry, excuse me, 75. I'm going to do some paced breathing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 4. As you exhale, your heart rate slows down. As you inhale, it speeds up.
It's your turn to try it.
So I just want to take a moment to kind of think a little bit about what we've just seen happen here. She's using, I think, some kind of like a Fitbit or some kind of a watch, some way that she's able to use biofeedback. She's able to see how her heart rate is actually going down. So she's not just aware of how she's feeling internally, but she can actually see the data points that she is calming down. That can be really helpful. It's when people end up in a suicidal crisis, one of the very common experiences is the feeling that we can't trust our brains. We can't trust a reality that's around us. And so seeing those data points, some of us will respond very strongly and positively to that. The other thing that I want to point out here, she talks about paced breathing. And when we went back to the autonomic system, we can't, autonomic, what does this mean? It means automatic, essentially. These are the automatic parts of our bodies, right? The organs that just do their thing. Thankfully, we don't have to tell our heart to beat. Otherwise, we'd never go to sleep at night, right? The one thing, the one organ that we do have control over are the lungs, the breathing. When we do paced breathing, which means that the exhale is longer than the inhale, it sends a message to all of the rest of the organs in our body that we're actually not being chased by that saber-toothed tiger. And everything else will start to slow down. Because if we were being chased by the saber-toothed tiger, we wouldn't have the time to take deep breaths, essentially. So that's part of what we're seeing in that video. I highly recommend this video for clients. In fact, I recommend the entire website, the Now Matters Now website, because there are many videos, people with lived experience of suicide, crisis, who talk about what they do now to help themselves when they have those overwhelming feelings. If you take anything from this presentation today, I would say take away, go to the Now Matters Now website and check it out. I think that you and your clients might find it to be very helpful. There are several apps in 2021. One of the good things about 2021 is that we've got a whole bunch of technology that people can use on their own at home in a socially distanced way. This virtual hope box is one of them. You can see that there are a variety of activities that help to distract, a variety of activities that help to relax. And they can add information that's specific to themselves into the app. So I mentioned earlier means restriction, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I really want to get to our role play coming up. But importantly, some of the main things about means restriction, as I said earlier, we did a myth and fact question earlier. I think it was a myth and fact, or maybe it was a true and false. But anyway, the idea of if we create a barrier to the desired method of self-harm, will the person just find a new way to harm themselves? And the research tells us no. Actually, we know with things like medication blister packs. So this is where people don't receive a bottle of medication, but they receive like a page where each pill is in a separate little blister. The time it takes for somebody to overdose on medications by popping out every single individual pill, research has shown us that that has actually helped quite a bit to reduce the number of suicide crises. In the same way, we know that when we lock up our guns or we separate the gun from the bullets, that can make a huge difference. I want to point out how important both the medication level of means restriction and gun means restriction is right now in the COVID-19 world. Why? Because at the beginning of the pandemic, we were told that we should stockpile medications. Remember that? So many of our clients or ourselves or our family members might have higher than usual amounts of medications in our home. One option to reduce the number of medications is to use disposal methods like old medications. You can mail them off through this takeaway, and there are other companies that do this as well. Or you can drop medications off in these medication disposal containers. If you go to this link, this is where you can put in your own zip code and find some of the local places to get rid of medications safely. Because we don't want to, of course, put them in the toilet because that goes to the ocean and water source and so on. We have gun safety is another very important thing to look at. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have seen increased numbers of gun sales. And with all of the social unrest that has happened in the last year and contentious elections and everything else, we are seeing that there are increased amounts of guns that are being purchased. I highly recommend if you have clients, and listen, I worked at Veterans Affairs for many, many years. Many veterans have a lot of guns. We don't ask them when they come into a program, do you have a gun? Instead, we ask, how many guns do you have? Is it under your pillow at night? Is it under your driver's seat in your car? Those kinds of things. I'm not meaning to be adding stereotypes out in there into the world. What I am instead saying is that my experience has been, not all veterans, but many veterans, if they have guns, they do have multiple guns because it's a part of the way they were trained. And so I know what it's like to have a conversation with somebody who has guns and has very strong feelings for their guns, and engage in conversations around gun safety can be very frightening. This link here is a fabulous video. Researcher, I can't remember now where she's at, but in a university has partnered up with gun sales businesses, and they've joined together and they've built up gun safety rules that are in line with the culture of guns in general. It's a fascinating video. If you have a chance to check it out, I highly recommend it. I would like to invite a volunteer who will pretend to be a client with me. And I am going to show everyone how to do a safety plan using the Stanley safety plan that I showed earlier, because it has the most evidence basis behind it. It is a simple safety plan. And as you're considering whether or not you want to be the person in the role play, I would ask you to please consider these things. What is, for your client or the person that you are pretending to be, your age, your race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity? Are you part of a religious or spiritual community? Are you a veteran? Where do you live? What are triggers or things that activate stress that make it feel like you're unable to go on? And what are some of the regulators? Those are the things that can help you to calm the central nervous system. And see if anyone would like to volunteer to be the client. Would you please put your name into the chat box saying, I'd like to be the role play person. So I'm going to jump in and I'm going to say that you are Tony. You are 10. And let's make you 30. Tony, you are 30 years old, okay? And let's say that you are a Caucasian 30-year-old heterosexual young man, okay? And we've been working together. Okay, here we go. Ready, set. Tony, thank you so much for doing the suicide risk assessment with me. I understand that things are getting stressful again. Those warning signs that you feel, okay, so these would be thoughts, these would be images or moods that let you know that you're starting to feel a little stressed. Like I've heard you say before, Tony, that when your mind starts racing, that's the sign for you that you're starting to feel really stressed out. What other signs, Tony, do you have from internal your body that lets you know you're starting to feel stressed out?
I cannot breathe. I sleep roughly. I start feeling agitated. I get angry easily.
Okay, thank you, Tony. That's really, really helpful to know. So you talked about your breathing starts to get really fast, and there are challenges with sleep as well. Okay, I'm writing that down. Thank you. Okay, so Tony, when you start to have those sensations that let you know that you're starting to feel really stressed out, what are some things that you can do that help yourself to take your mind off of whatever the stressful thing is that's happening? Like, for example, you've talked before about playing video games, really enjoying playing video games. Mm-hmm. What other things do you find helpful that get your mind off of stress for a little bit?
I like to play with my cat and my dog.
Playing with cat and dog. A lot of people really find that helpful. There's a Now Matters Now website that I'm going to share with you later. There's a video where a person talks about her relationship with her cat as helping in the exact same way. When she starts to feel overwhelmed and has thoughts of wanting to hurt herself, petting the cat is really helpful. Excellent. Okay. So we've talked now about playing video games and we talked about petting the cat. Luckily, these two things are things that you can do at home. You don't have to go anywhere right now. So in the shelter in place world, those are okay things to do. I really like both of them as well because they're interacting with other living creatures, right? When you play video games, you could play video games online with people from all over the world. So you're actually having a social engagement at that moment if you want to play video games like that with other people. When you're petting your cat, you and your cat are both releasing oxytocin and other happy hormones that are helping you and your cat at the same time to feel calm. So now let's go to step 3. Let's talk about a couple of people and social situations that can help provide distraction. So these are people that you could call or reach out to. You don't have to tell them that you're feeling really stressed, but just call and reach out to them and engage in a conversation. Are there two people that you could identify in your life that are like that?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, I'm thinking about the people from church and probably group.
Church and group, outstanding. With many churches these days, they are having church services online. That might be an option to think about in the socially distanced world. And you talked about group, and we're doing group therapy online too. At the end of this, if it's okay, I'd like to also share a couple of additional group level supports, like text messaging that you could do with people and other things that are accessible during socially distanced world. Great. Now, the next thing is, and this is an important one as well, who are a couple of people that you can reach out to and you feel comfortable being honest with them, that you're actually starting to feel like you're having a really hard time? Is there anyone that you feel comfortable with saying, you know, I actually really feel overwhelmed by stress or sadness or anger right now?
Yeah, I have a couple of good friends.
Okay, can you tell me who are some of those good friends? Maybe the top two, please.
Eva and B.
Ava and B, wonderful. I've written their names down here. Because this is your safety plan, I would like to encourage you to write their phone numbers down or to tell me what their phone numbers are. You could either share their phone numbers with me and we can talk about a release of information if you want me ever to be able to communicate with them. If you don't want me to, that's fine too. You can write their phone numbers down yourself when you get the safety plan from me. But the reason why I encourage actually writing their phone numbers down is because when we start to feel overwhelmed by stress or anger or anxiety, sometimes our brains can start racing, kind of like what you were talking about before, right? So having it written down can be really helpful. Okay, so let's pretend that Tony gives me the numbers, I write them down, we sign a release of information. Okay, great, going back into character. Okay, we're doing great here, Tony. You're really, really working hard on this safety plan. I think it's gonna help you if things get stressed out again in the future. The next level is to talk about professionals or agencies that you can contact during a crisis. Okay, yes. So taking myself out of character and I'm saying, I'm writing these things down. Again, the address, the phone number, being aware if in a socially distanced world, these agencies have closed their doors, we need to know how and where to identify them. And then we would go into means restriction and making the environment safe. So let's say that we know that he has guns in the house. We want to make sure that they are in a locked case or that the bullets have been put in a separate place or what have you. Importantly, and thank you so much, Elisa, that was really wonderful. Virtual clapping for you. Really appreciate your willingness to step in this way.
Thank you.
So I'm going to move right along for us for just a moment. So you've seen how we did the role play. Again, the idea was that I'm writing everything in his language, right? So it's I rather than Tony, and I'm giving him a copy of this. I'm going to share with you a couple of things. The first thing is that there are plenty of apps out there where you can actually put the safety plan into the phone. So they have it with them at all times. This is another example of this. That resource guide that I've given you has all of these resources written into it. One thing I want to share, if I had more time, would be to talk about the feelings thermometer. The idea of this is that when we do a safety plan with people, we really want to encourage them to start using the safety plan when they're starting to get into here, 3, 4, and 5, starting to feel a little bit stressed out, but they're not overwhelmed. When they're getting uncomfortable, even more. When we get up to this exploding out of control point, that's when it's harder to really use the safety plan, though it's still possible, certainly. I've given you a list of alternative activities that people can use for self-regulation. Here are some helpful thinking alternatives. This is from the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. Things that people can, thought processes to use to get through the COVID-19 outbreak. As schools start to open, for example, we might have higher rates of anxiety, social anxiety. This is the psychological first aid app I had mentioned that are support people who are listed in the safety plan. So remember, the safety plan support people would be people number 4, step 4, people whom I can ask for help. And there's information in here about culturally specific suicide prevention. Importantly, we want to build on the strengths and resiliencies of cultures, and we want to think about those culturally specific suicide risk factors that I mentioned before as an example. The Safe Place is an app that's created specifically for Black Americans' experiences with not just mental health crises, but also difficult interactions with law enforcement. And it's that intercept between systemic racism that can really escalate a mental health crisis significantly and into an issue of safety. Here's an example of a safety intervention, a suicide prevention intervention that's specific to veterans. This is a website veterans can go to, and they can upload a picture of a dog or a kid, a child, a parent, a loved one, put that image directly on the gun itself, and then they're looking at it if they're at a point where they're feeling like they might engage in self-harm. For LGBTQ youth and adults, hearing other people's experiences who are LGBTQ plus about how they've been able to get through and get better, experience recovery is really, really helpful. So these are some websites that have videos that they can go to and get a sense of hope from. It's the It Gets Better project. Connect with us, the Care TA Center. We want to be in contact with you. Here's our email address, phone number, our website, and please do connect with us on social media and join our newsletter. It's only sent out quarterly, so we would love to be in contact with you.